Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Because I have been through all the tapes, I have been through all the texts, I have been through all the emails, and I knew none existed. Reporter, wait, what tapes have you gone through? Rudy? I shouldn't have said tapes. Frank?
He shouldn't say anything at this point. So he's gone through things that don't. He's gone through things that don't exist. He is really the worst enemy of the president, and we're in an upside down world, Nicole, where the prosecutor in the case, the special counsel, issues a press release to say that an allegation of crime against the president is not accurate from BuzzFeed, and the president's defense counsel goes on television to incriminate his client. So that's the world we're living in. I keep coming back to what's already been said is, why all the lying about Russia? And Nicole, I am left now with only one conclusion, that the news on Russia, the truth about Russia, is so bad that no one can afford to let it leak out. We have too many people covering up the same thing over and over again, and the only conclusion I have is that it's about as bad as it can be.
So what would that be? Let me just press you. And would that be a bribe? Would that be sanctions relief in exchange for a plot of land that Don Jr. said, oh, we don't even have a plot of land. We don't even have a developer. It doesn't mean it wasn't promised. What could it be?
No, I think it's worse than that. Listen, I'm developing a real sense here that there is now knowledge within the Trump circle. The Russians did assist with, in a successful way, the winning of the presidency. I am increasingly convinced that this is what people are trying to cover.
Frank, you can't leave me there. Tell me what is pointing you in that direction.
So, if we look at, I'm particularly focused on Paul Manafort, right, and his incredible reticence and reluctance to fully cooperate. Mike Flynn and the judge saying, you're not there yet, I'm not ready to accept to handle sentencing yet. The Trump family members, Cohen saying they're getting briefed. The polling data going from Manafort to Russia. All of this points to knowledge in my mind that it was understood that the Russians were assisting the campaign, and that they did so in such a way. Remember, we have over 24 Russians indicted already between hacking and social media propaganda in support of the campaign. We have Vladimir Putin saying in Helsinki to a reporter's question, did you tell your government to put their full force and support behind candidate Trump? Answer, yes. I believe there's knowledge of that. I believe there's great fear about the extent to which they assisted. And I think that's at the root of what people are lying about.
It is Wednesday, the 23rd of January of 2019, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this Nazi priest from Covington School there in Kentucky? Boy, what? Oh my God, these kids and their parents and their faculty and their administration. I'm getting a license plate border that says, my Parkland students can take your Covington Catholic school students to the woodshed. Jeez. Oh my God. And they've got an invite to the White House. Mm-hmm. Oh, and David exposed, well, he didn't expose, but brought to light that Trump's chief legal counsel went to Covington. And it beggars the question. Does he wear blackface during Alumni Week? Just wondering. It's school spirit, you know. Wearing blackface and trying to intimidate the opposition of color is just school spirit. And this school wants us to apologize to them? Yeah, right. I think this school should be shut down. These parents need to find another school to segregate their white boys from the rest of the population. Yeah, parochial schools flourished in the South for that very reason. And here we are, 2019. Okay, well, lots more going on in the world. Looks like Deutsche Bank is being investigated by the Federal Reserve, as well as Mueller. And it's another one of I told you so's. I have that trademarked. Well, kind of. I put a trademark symbol on it, but it's sarcastic. I told you so. And let's not forget, how much money did Anthony Kennedy get to step down? And, his son worked for, yes, Deutsche Bank. I wondered, what was it, just a straight, like a straight exchange? You step down, we'll protect your son? Has Donald Trump ever kept a promise? He gets what he wants, and then he gets what he wants. And that's the reason and that's one of the many reasons the Trumps are lying about everything. As Frank Figliuzzi exposed, reported, brought to light at the top here in the Bistro Cafe at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And and really one of the main reasons the Trumps are lying about everything is because it is spelled Vlad and the Russians literally won the election for Donnie Two Scoops. Oh, and lordy, there are tapes. I learned a long time, and apparently Rudy never picked this up. I learned a long time ago. I was still a kid. I wasn't even legally able to drink, or, then any other substances were by default illegal. But I learned a long time ago, don't get plastered when you get up on stage and you want to perform. Yeah. What little semblance of you that may still be there is going to be terribly embarrassed by the bad performance. I never did that again. One time. I thought rock and rollers and those people, that brought out the art. Boy, was I wrong. And I got called up on stage, not really expecting it. And I was out of it. And I completely embarrassed myself. There was a feeble little applause that sunk my heart. And I never did that again. And that was that wasn't even anything serious. That was in some little backwater place. It wasn't meant to change the world by any means. But I learned maybe it's not a good idea for some people to tip a few before getting in front of the camera. And Rudy apparently feels that he needs to. And in this instance, I would normally tell people, tone it down. But with Rudy, come on. I want another one? Tell me more. Would you like another? Here, tell me more. Indeed. Oh, well, what's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Well, Justice Alito penned a bizarre love letter to the Christian right. Yeah. You get the Supreme Court that you get. Especially when appointments and nominees have been held up for a year, 2 years, especially if you're the black president. Now the white president can't get enough justices appointed. They're trying to even kill off Ruth Bader Ginsburg before she's dead. Lindsey Graham is mocked for his plans to settle old scores and abuse his power by investigating Hillary Clinton. Of course, Lindsey made his bones. How little they are. Back in the day by going after Trump for his lascivious lifestyle. Which made me think that Lindsey has always had a lascivious lifestyle, if that's the thing that he's going to plant his petard upon. Ew. And Wess Mitchell, the top U.S. diplomat for European affairs, has resigned, citing personal and professional reasons. Professional reasons? What might those be? After the break, we then move to the chef's table where Mitch McConnell wants to change the Senate's rules yet again to ram through even more of Trump's radical nominees. Yeah. Black guy, nothing. You can't get nothing. White guy? Oh, we have a list here that even the Federalist Society can't complete, and we've had to outsource that to, Vlad and his crew. And Walgreens has agreed to pay $269.2 million to settle 2 U.S. civil fraud lawsuits. I think that's about the equivalent to the Walton family that control this largesse. I think that's about the equivalent of a nickel each. I think they can afford it. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. And her husband picked up our son's remains yesterday from the funeral home, and so he's in his room right now, and I will be going up there probably this weekend to bring part of him home here in the Southern Oregon region of Oregon, and I bought a nice little Asian, more towards the Japanese end of Asian, a ginger jar, dark blue with nice calligraphy, and by Bashu, which makes it then Japanese, doesn't it? So that made me a little sad yesterday. I mean, sad, just the general grief that I'm going through, and a reminder that some cultures get rid of everything. They burn all the clothes and, just let it go. Just let it go. And I understand that. And I don't think that in the realm of existence that we're in that there is any really letting go. All of our atoms are mingling right now. All of them. So what is, as Walt Whitman would say, what is life? What is death? And death is always different than what is supposed, and maybe even luckier. As Jack London expounded towards the end of Martin Eden, it's not death that's that hurts? It's the struggle to live. That's where the pain resides. Yeah, that pain's there to remind us, hey, buddy, you think this is heaven on earth? It's hell. Deal with it. And when you can, then you can make your own heaven, right? Whatever the message is, doesn't really matter. All of our atoms are mingling right now. Odd way to look at it, but I prefer that than some sort of sugary, heaven where it's all bright and gilded and fluffy clouds. I don't know. That doesn't matter to me. There is order in the chaos. It's only chaos because of our inability to understand the order. And that's why we've always called that God. Always. Well, if you go to the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will notice to the rightish of the page the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. To the leftish of the chat room link at the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, you will then notice the contribute button. And all kidding aside, if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, your recurring contribution goes so far. We're able to stretch dollars beyond their stretchability because we're really quite well practiced. We are unable to do this without you, and your generosity does keep the bills being paid. All right, we're digging into our wallets, and we are so happy that you're willing to buy us a coffee or such once a month. And once again, thank you to our newest Patreons. I will get back to you at least with a note right away, and then we'll go from there. All right. You can follow Netroots Radio on Twitter at Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and we are forever grateful that he does. Follow me on Twitter at Justice Putnam. I take care of that because it's me. And you can also check out the show notes and links diary that I do post on Daily Kos about 10 minutes before showtime, a very integral part to the show, by the way. And I can be found there as Justice Putnam. How easy is that? Now, if you wanted to follow the show on Twitter, you're going to have to follow us at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy by way of Stitcher, Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever fine podcasts can be found, mixed in with all the not-so-fine ones because it's all there. Every single atom. It's all there. All righty. Speaking of all there, I got to wonder about Alito. Is he really all there? Ian Millhiser penned this medium longish piece, and of course he is out of Think Progress. You know, following the law may soon be optional if you are a conservative Christian, because trust me, Nathan Phillips practicing his religion. Can you imagine if even Jeffers or any of the Westboro Baptist people had been confronted and surrounded by how about the black Israelites? How about if 70 to 100 of them showed up and surrounded the Westboro Baptists, bouncing around, mocking them, and one stood there defiantly with a smirk on his face, interrupting the religious practice of a bunch of white Christians? Do you think that the National Guard would have just stood by? No, they would have been nationalized or federalized and put to work. So Alito's love letter to evangelicals is very concerning. But we knew that from before. It's another one of those trademarked I told you so's. Well, one of the Christian right's top policy priorities is to effectively create two different codes of law in the U.S. The first code, which applies to people who do not hold conservative religious views, is rigid and unmoving. 3 strikes and you're out of here, buddy. Out. Never to be seen from again. The second code, which would apply primarily to Christian-identified conservatives, contains broad exceptions for people who hold the right religious beliefs. That's not incest on a child. That's not pedophilia. No, that's your God-given right. It is. The end game is a world where Christian conservatives can treat much of the law as optional, applicable only to people who are not like them. Think of the Supreme Court's recent decision in Masterpiece Cake versus Colorado Civil Rights Commission, where an anti-gay business owner claimed that he could refuse to follow the state's civil rights laws because his religion taught him not to serve same-sex couples at their weddings. Well, geez. The foremost conservative members of the Supreme Court signaled on Tuesday that they are itching to turn this agenda into law. Indeed, Samuel Alito's opinion in Kennedy versus Bremerton School District suggests that the court's right flank would give Christian conservatives such broad immunity from the rules that govern all other Americans that it is unclear that the government would be allowed to manage its own workforce, at least when some members of the workforce identify with the Christian right. Kennedy involves a former high school football coach who was fired because he would conclude football games by walking out to the 50-yard line and praying as a performance in front of his players and the crowd. Oh, God, I hate these kinds of people. I'm sorry. But please. Can you imagine if the coach was a Hare Krishna and a white Hare Krishna? They're the worst. Oh, my God. And he went out to the 50-yard line and started bouncing around and doing his tablas and, and chanting. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna, Krishna. Yeah, they would have taken him away in a straitjacket. There wouldn't have been any Supreme Court hearing on this. But it did make its way up to the Supreme Court because this guy has a God-given right to impose his beliefs on everybody because he is the right religion. The founding fathers, apparently to Alito, said that there will be no religious test when it's applied to a white Christian man. Oliver Willis brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. Will no one rid me of this Nazi priest? Well, instead of investigating Trump crime and corruption, Lindsey's going to attack Hillary Clinton instead, because how many rubles are really in his pocket? When we talk about him being compromised, we're not talking about some sort of sexual peccadillo. It's enough that he has rubles galore, all right? That's enough. He knows where that leads. Of course he's going to protect his backside. Not because of sexual peccadillos. Let's be clear. Well, he's being mocked for making plans to use the Senate Judiciary Committee to settle old scores and abuse his power. He's only recently became the chairman of the committee, and rather than investigate the wide array of scandals that have surfaced involving Trump, Trump's henchmen, the Trump family, other Republicans, and, I don't know, the Kochs and everybody else, Graham said he wants to investigate Clinton's email server and the decisions that led the FBI to investigate Trump campaign aides like Carter Page. I love their argument that the Steele dossier is somehow, the origin of all. And it is therefore bad, and everything in it is wrong, when everything in it has been proven right. And they keep calling it the P tape, of course. because, that's a very small part of it, some salacious aspect. All right. And, but everything else has been proven. Now, they think because, no one really peed. Well, who cares? And we know that two prostitutes peed on the Obama's bed after they left when Trump went there, and he insisted, and that's supposed to be the thing that, no one would believe that. Well, yeah, it doesn't matter whether we believe it or not. People, probably even as most ardent supporters, will say, yeah, that's great. We like it. That's what makes Trump Trump. So, going after Carter Page, like there was some sort of visa application violation going after Carter Page. Really, Lindsey? You're going to go there? Sheldon Whitehouse suggested that maybe Graham should investigate Benghazi some more, too. And I'm afraid that Lindsey raised an eyebrow and said, you know what? That's a great idea. Now, well, let's remember, the Repugs lost the House in part because they ignored Trump-era corruption and mismanagement. Well, with his announcement for how he's going to lead the Judiciary Committee, Graham has made it clear he intends to cover for his friend. And we're not talking about Trump. He hates Trump. We're talking about Vlad. Graham has a really good friend. And once you become his friend, you never stop being his friend. Rofton of Reuters brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, this news of Wess Mitchell resigning comes also on the heels of a major report opinion out of Davos, in which really the rest of the world is looking at the United States actually dismantling its own economic structure for really at the detriment of the U.S. and also the world. It's being done on purpose for the express purpose of how I put it. They didn't put it this way. But if you read between the lines, its property is always more valuable when delivered vacant. So are you really going to fix the leaky pipes? No. You want the leaky pipes so you drive those people out. You're going to put in smoke detectors? What? The best way to get people to leave is so that they will never come back. Ever. Fouling your air? You need them out. Property is always more valuable when delivered vacant. So it is interesting that Wess Mitchell is resigning at this time. Now, as a reminder, he's the top diplomat for European affairs. And he did have a resignation letter that was seen by Reuters yesterday. And at a time when trans-European relations with Trump were at a really bad ebb. In the letter to U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, you know how I feel about him, right? Dated on January 4th, Mitchell said he felt he had completed his goals for the post and wanted to spend more time with his young family. Yeah. Now, according to this report, there's no indication that he's doing it out of protest, though there is a quote that is for personal and professional reasons. And as far as I know, it's not necessarily because of any untoward conduct by this diplomat. He was brought on board by Secretary of State Rex Tillerson as Trump threatened to withdraw the U.S. from NATO, and Washington accused Moscow of meddling in the 2016 presidential election. And so he was brought in to somewhat mend that, or at least keep it from being fractured even more. And apparently he feels he's done his job, which is either Trump's bidding, or he is tired of doing Trump's bidding, and for professional reasons. We'll find out later, won't we? All right, let's get to our break, and when we come back from that break, we're going to go through weather from around the world, and I tell you there is weather from around the world. And we're going to finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, Just Step. Ruth Bader Ginsburg now occupies a place in popular culture that is unprecedented for a Supreme Court justice. Just last year, she was the subject of the popular Magnolia Pictures documentary RBG. Now, played by Rogue One's Felicity Jones, Ginsburg's back on the big screen in her own biopic, On the Basis of Sex. Producer/director Mimi Leder and screenwriter/Ginsburg nephew Daniel Stiepelman have made a film that starts with Bader Ginsburg entering Harvard Law School in 1956, only 6 years into Harvard letting women in at all. Bader Ginsburg enters 1 year behind her husband, Martin Ginsburg, played by Armie Hammer, who against all expectation is developing a really cool filmography. And all of this is an appetizer for the main dish, 1972's Charles E. Morris versus the Commissioner of the Internal Revenue, i.e. the IRS, which both Ginsburgs argued before the 10th Circuit Court of Appeals, and in which Bader Ginsburg first develops her strategy for future gender discrimination cases, where the film shows her legal secretary inventing the term gender discrimination. That's how ground level we are here. Stiepelman aptly melds the film's personal and professional plots to tell the same story. On one hand, you have Ruth and Meredith's marriage, which is an even domestic partnership strengthened by mutual support and respect that shines in contrast to the hidebound discrimination that Bader Ginsburg suffers both in her education and in her job, and which she eventually fights in the courts. Felicity Jones plays Bader Ginsburg a little more fiery than fans of RBG have grown to know her as, but it's the more dramatic choice. Behind the camera, Leder tells the story well. One of my favorite things is how she uses Ginsburg walking as both a visual motif and as a metaphor for the movie's theme, that legal discrimination is an evil built step by step and is dismantled the same way. So who's the next justice to get a movie? I hope it's Brett Kavanaugh. Maybe Harvey Weinstein will produce it. I hear he's not doing anything right now. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our page on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Trees in cities do measurable good for biodiversity and for human health. They scrub pollution from the air. They provide habitat for wildlife. They make streets look nicer. And they even reduce stress and have been linked to reductions in crime. Back in 2015, a group of Toronto-based researchers discovered that planting just 11 more trees per city block could reduce heart-related conditions by the same amount as if everybody living on that block became a year and a half younger. But in Detroit, between 2011 and 2014, a quarter of eligible homeowners turned down an offer from a local nonprofit for free street trees. Ironic, considering Detroit's nickname was once the City of Trees.
It was actually over 1,800 trees that were rejected out of an eligible 7,425. So it was a big enough issue at that point where it warranted further investigation.
Forestry researcher Christine Carmichael, who did the research at Michigan State and has since moved to the University of Vermont. The nonprofit created an education campaign to get more residents to accept the free trees. The assumption being that if people had all the facts, they'd be more likely to take the trees. But when Carmichael talked to residents, she found that they understood the benefits of trees. Their unease was about trust.
Basically, what I found was that opposition in Detroit to tree planting among some of these residents resulted primarily from negative past experiences with street trees, particularly in low-income neighborhoods that were grappling with blight from vacant properties, which created an additional burden of care for their neighborhood.
In the last half-century or so, more than 500,000 Detroit trees died from disease and neglect. At the same time, the city underwent dramatic demographic shifts. By 2016, Detroit was 82% African American and had the highest percentage of low-income residents in the country. As a result, it was primarily low-income African American communities who were forced to deal with the consequences and the hazards, like falling limbs, posed by dead trees. In speaking with residents, Carmichael found that they would be more willing to accept free trees if they could be more involved in the decision-making process. Locals wanted input on tree size and whether they produced flowers. They also very reasonably wanted to avoid trees that could drop rotting fruits or sap on cars and sidewalks. The findings by Carmichael and Maureen McDonough are in the journal Society and Natural Resources.
It's important to provide a space for people's stories to be heard about what their experience of community change has been, and let them know that you understand and respect their experience. And I think that would open people up more to trusting the intentions of organizations that come into a neighborhood to do good.
Thanks for the minute. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution, and you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage, because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
Quote, a federal judge has blocked the Commerce Department from adding a question on American citizenship to the 2020 census, handing a legal victory to critics who accuse the Trump administration of trying to turn the census into a tool to advance Republican political fortunes. I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute, and that was the opening paragraph in the New York Times report under the headline, Judge Rejects Census Query on Citizenship. The census matters. It determines how congressional seats are allocated and federal funds distributed. And the question about citizenship, the government agrees, will scare off many persons from responding to the census questionnaire. Indeed, the Commerce Department itself predicted that the question would reduce voluntary responses by about 6 million, an estimate that makes eminent sense given that there are 24 million non-citizens living in the United States, about 11 million of whom are undocumented, and the fear factor among immigrant families, regardless of their status, to answer an official government document, well, that just makes plain sense. However, the decision from Federal District Court Judge Jesse Furman is only the first battle in the legal war. The case likely will reach the Supreme Court before the 2020 census forms are printed in the summer of 2019. So stay tuned. This case really matters. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
It's Wednesday, day 33 of the Trump shutdown with no end in sight. And if the Republicans' deflection has you questioning what you know to be true, here's Fox News' Shepard Smith, who must have compromising photos of Rupert Murdoch somewhere, explaining what's true.
On principle, Shep, they want to open the government first and then negotiate about border security. But the White House is concerned that if they were to agree to reopen the government, the Democrats would suddenly say, border security? What border security? Shep?
John Roberts, live at the White House. For fact's sake, the president shut down the government. He told the Democrats in the Oval Office that he would carry the mantle for it, that he would be proud to do it, and that he wouldn't blame the Democrats for it.
As for moving ahead with negotiations, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi has one simple remedy. Open the government and we can talk.
Open up government. Open the government. Let's talk. Cannot have the president every time he has an objection to say, I'll shut down government until you come to my way of thinking. Understand, that is part of the point of this. If we hold the employees hostage now, they're hostage forever. And by the way, what the president proposed is granting what he had already taken away. The DACA recipients had their protections. The temporary protected status, TPS, had their protection. The president took it away, and now he's saying, well, I'll give you this back temporarily if you give me a wall permanently. Open up government.
While Trump plays his games, hundreds of thousands of federal workers are poised to miss a second paycheck this Friday. For some, this might mean eviction, hunger, and for at least one woman, missed chemotherapy treatments. It's shameful. Now that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has found Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader is pretending to enter the shutdown fray, allowing 2 votes on Thursday on competing proposals to reopen the government. The first vote will be on Trump's laughable proposal to extend legal protections for some immigrants for 3 years in exchange for a $5.7 billion border wall ransom. The second vote will be the clean continuing resolution that would reopen the government for 3 weeks with no additional border wall money, but would allow both sides to get back to the negotiating table. Until this week, all McConnell did was block the House bills that would have reopened the government while negotiations continued. On Tuesday, he did it again, blocking a bill that would temporarily reopen the Department of Homeland Security. Meanwhile, Donald Trump's scheduled State of the Union address on Tuesday remains in limbo after Nancy Pelosi had asked him to reschedule, citing security concerns during the shutdown. The White House reportedly sent a letter on Tuesday asking Congress to conduct a dry run ahead of the speech, a sign that Trump may disregard Pelosi's request to reschedule, or a sign that he just doesn't know how to read. Stay tuned. The newly reconstituted Supreme Court, complete with Brett I Like Beer Kavanaugh in place, handed the president a partial and temporary win on Tuesday, allowing the administration to enforce its shameful and bigoted restrictions on transgender people serving in the military.
This is the one, remember, that President Trump announced by tweet last year, saying he wanted to ban transgender military service. The Pentagon eventually modified that to say you could stay in the military if you served in your own biological sex and did not seek gender reassignment surgery. 3 federal courts put that on hold, saying it was unconstitutional discrimination. The Trump administration came here to the Supreme Court and said, we want you to let us enforce this ban while it plays out in the lower courts. And today, the Supreme Court granted that request. So if it chooses to do so, the Pentagon can now start enforcing the transgender military service ban. We'll have to see whether the Pentagon chooses to do that. Obviously, this case will not be heard until next year if the Supreme Court grants the case. So it's somewhat up in the air. The order here says that if the court grants review and decides that it's unconstitutional, the order would terminate. But it's not going to hear this case until next term, so the Pentagon could go ahead and start enforcing this ban.
Power to the people! Power to the people!
Congratulations to teachers and students in Los Angeles. They returned to the classroom Wednesday after a 6-day strike. The agreement reached gives educators a 6% raise, smaller class sizes, and more nurses, librarians, and counselors. Next up, Denver, where teachers voted to go on strike for the first time in 25 years, demanding an overhaul to the school district's compensation system. That smirking kid in the MAGA hat who stared down a Native American outside the Lincoln Memorial has come under intense scrutiny, and for good reason. His family hired a high-priced PR firm to draft the kid's response. On Wednesday morning, he appeared on the Today Show to continue lying about his actions. We won't be playing any of the drivel he spewed on this report. And that's a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I hope you'll consider making a contribution. My work is 100% listener supported, and I can't do it without your help. Find out more at NicoleSandler.com/donate.
From New York, I'm Luke Vargas with your World in 2 Minutes. Vice President Mike Pence lashed out at Venezuela's government on Tuesday, labeling President Nicolas Maduro a dictator and praising opposition lawmakers a day ahead of planned demonstrations. In 2017, faced with a nagging opposition that controlled Venezuela's National Assembly, Maduro created another legislature and made sure his supporters were in the majority. But the National Assembly, led by opposition leader Juan Guaido, has struck back, and last week declared Maduro to be illegally usurping power, a move that Pence vocally endorsed.
The United States joins with all freedom-loving nations in recognizing the National Assembly as the last vestige of democracy in your country, for it's the only body elected by you, the people.
If the opposition can keep this as a battle between the Venezuelan people and the government, and if they can have a good turnout in the protest tomorrow, well, that could be demoralizing for the government.
David Smiley is a senior fellow at the Washington Office on Latin America.
But when Mike Pence puts out a video like this makes it into a conflict between the United States and the Maduro government, and that's the terrain where the Maduro government is much more comfortable.
Case in point, top Venezuelan officials have already responded to Pence, saying, "Yankee, get out." Yet by most accounts, the U.S. is only likely to get more involved. Pushed by figures like Senator Marco Rubio, the White House is considering whether to recognize Guaido as Venezuela's rightful president, a bold step considering Guaido himself, one of the few opposition figures not in prison, has yet to officially claim power.
If he does it too soon, without real support in the population, in the military, then it's just going to backfire, and he'll just get arrested. If he waits too long, well, he might get arrested anyway. And so he has kind of a window of opportunity. I think the key here is to let him and the opposition decide when that moment is and not try to push that from the outside.
Luke Vargas, New York.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Smothered Benedict Wednesdays. It's really just a lovely egg dish with a velvety hollandaise. Yummy. Okay, we always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 39 degrees Fahrenheit. We're looking at a high of around 53 overnight lows. Looks like they'll be edging up ever so slightly into the mid to upper 30s for the next foreseeable nights. Winds are light and variable out of the west and will remain so for the next foreseeable few days. We are having a little bit of a drizzle at the moment. Oh, I apologize. Actually, the winds will be shifting out of the west to the south-southeast, or out of the south-southeast in just about 2 hours, and they'll be at 5 to 10 miles per hour throughout the day, and then will remain out of the south-southeast, but light and variable, so more like 1 to 2 miles per hour for at least tonight and tomorrow, and then we'll see if we have any kind of a pinching effect where winds might come up again, because it looks like we might have a little bit of wind. The pollen is... Oh, I'm sorry. I meant to finish up here. We will have showers overnight. Rain today and tonight is expected to bring us, oh my gosh, just about 1/4 of an inch. And something less than 1/4 of an inch tomorrow. And then I think we'll have a drying out period just for a little bit. All right, pollen is rated at none. The air quality index remains at 57 parts per million in the orange warning moderate region. So if you have breathing problems, don't breathe outside. And the daytime UV index is low at 2. Barometric pressure is rising at 30.22 inches. Visibility is at 6 miles. And relative humidity is at 93%. Oh, boy. If it was warmer, it'd be sticky, but it's not. Still a little chilly in some people's frame of reference. All right. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. London is 36 degrees and mostly cloudy, and they actually have a freeze warning. Paris is 34 and snow, and they have a heavy snow warning. Rome is 45 degrees with a rain shower, and they have a flood warning. Kiev is 21 degrees with light snow. Kabul is 22 degrees and clear. No wedding parties. That's my recommendation. The drones fly when it's clear. So just remember this, when the drones fly, people in wedding parties die. Hong Kong is 55 and clear. Tokyo is 46 and clear with another very dry warning. Dry air. So dry it's like sandpaper, apparently, without the sand. Sydney, Australia is 73 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 44 degrees and clear. And New York is 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Cloudy. Under a weather advisory. Yes, a flash flood watch. Batten down the hatches, stay warm, stay dry, and may your boats be a-rising. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property. And these people positively live around the world. Lisa Needham of Share Blue Media brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Now, to call Mitch McConnell a bad actor, well, I don't know. Is he really that bad of an actor? He acts pretty despicable. I don't know if that's method acting or if that's just typecasting. I actually think it's typecasting, to be honest with you. And but it is true that in terms of negotiations, he's a bad actor. You can't trust the guy. Just like somebody by the name of Trump. And I would also like to thank Mitch McConnell for destroying the great experiment. But you know what? We're going to mend it in spite of you. In a move that should surprise no one, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, repug of Kentucky, in this reporter's opinion, of course. I'm just embellishing Lisa's writing. You know that. Well, he's considering changing the Senate rules yet again to rush even more of Trump's nominees through the confirmation process. And the expedited confirmations could start as soon as next week. Is the government open? Can he do that? Oh, that's right, he can. Because who cares about what the Democrats think? They aren't really Americans now, after all. The good Americans speak Cyrillic. Well, actually, they don't speak Cyrillic because Cyrillic is a written language, but you know what I mean. Republicans are unhappy about the fact that under current rules, Democrats get to demand a thorough debate period of up to 30 hours per nominee. The proposed rule would drastically cut debate time for mid-level agency appointees to 8 hours and limit post-cloture discussions for district court judicial nominations to a mere 2 hours. Well, listen, when you're investigating treason and Russian involvement in our government and you only allow 1 minute to 2 minutes of a question period per committee member, you can get 8 hours. Okay, you can give us 8 hours. He won't even do that. Republicans like to claim Democrats are engaging in unprecedented obstruction. Jesus. Well, they're counting on American amnesia now, aren't they? And I should say that among the American amnesiacs that are of the most virulent, toxic part of his base, it doesn't matter whether they remember it or not. Trump is the right president for the right time.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Jonathan Stemple of Reuters brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Walgreens Boots Alliance, Inc. will pay $269.2 million to settle 2 whistleblower lawsuits accusing it of civil fraud for overbilling federal health care programs for over a decade. Wow. The pharmacy chain will pay $209.2 million to resolve claims it improperly billed Medicare, Medicaid, and other federal programs from 2006 to 2017 for hundreds of thousands of insulin pens it dispensed to patients it knew did not need them. Wow. So it's not really the welfare queen that's, or apparently brown people coming across the border and sucking up all of our money, all of our freedoms. It's corporate America that's doing it. Let's build a wall around them. And we can when we start putting some of their principal owners in jail. The Deerfield, Illinois company said it admits, acknowledges, and accepts responsibility for conduct alleged by the federal government. I think it's already proven. Sorry, folks. The company recently had more than 9,400 drugstores in the U.S. Walgreens settlements resolve claims under the Federal False Claims Act, which lets private whistleblowers sue on the federal government's behalf and share in recoveries. About $200 million of the payout will go to the federal government and the rest to state governments. 2 pharmacists filed the original complaint concerning the insulin pens in July of 2015. And Mark Baker, who worked for Walgreens for a decade as a pharmacy manager in Florida, filed the original complaint concerning the drug price discounts in January of 2012. Now, both lawsuits had been filed under seal, and now they're exposed for what they are. And that brings us to the end of our broadcast period, but not for Netroots Radio. You know Netroots Radio is going to broadcast on. We're going to meet up tomorrow for Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. So stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we'll meet up here tomorrow in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théâtres, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.